Which brings us to our guest speaker tonight, Miranda Viscoli, who is the co-president of the nonpartisan organization New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. After the Sandy Hook shooting, Miranda suspended work on her PhD at UNM in order to research and write about the problem of gun violence both in New Mexico and around the country. Since then, she's worked with schools, school boards, police departments, legislators, city councils, and others to implement gun violence prevention measures throughout the state. Miranda also serves as a regional board member for States United Against Gun Violence and was awarded the 10 Who Made a Difference Award in 2016 for her work on gun violence prevention. As New Mexicans for Money Out of Politics prepares for the 2018-2019 New Mexico legislative sessions, we felt it would be a good idea to have a seasoned lobbyist like Miranda address the good, the bad, and the ugly in working with our state legislature. So it's my honor and pleasure to welcome Miranda Viscoli.
I want to make sure that people know that I am not New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. I have an amazing board and amazing volunteers, and Ann Maxwell's over there, and Barrister, who's our legislative liaison, and she knows everybody in the, she's like Mick Jagger in the Capitol, and Paula McLean, our vice president, and we all, like you guys, work together. My name gets out there, but I am not the shaker and the mover. So anyway, I think what I've prepared for you all tonight is something that will be useful, and if it's not, I wasted an hour of your, or a half hour of your time, and you'll never get that half hour back. New Mexican, and Alan Weber I met back in Las Cruces, 4 years ago, and I was talking about gun violence prevention, and he said, I know nothing about this issue, will you educate me? And we sat down for 3 hours, and I love it when somebody who's running really wants to get educated on an issue, and we appreciate that, because a lot of people don't. We at New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, we're really about coalition building and helping others, and any work we do, we want to share. And so if we can make that happen, and tonight we're going to share how we pass a gun violence prevention bill in New Mexico. Sadly, the governor vetoed it and sided with domestic violence abusers, which was not what we were expecting. But it was, I think, the first gun violence prevention bill to pass in the history of our state. I don't think we actually have any gun violence prevention bills when you look at how weak they are. We see advocacy as a web, so we're all intertwined, right? Whether you choose getting money out of politics, whether you choose immigration, whether you choose poverty, hunger, we all need to make sure that we're working together and figure out ways that we can share our knowledge and our knowledge base. So that's something that we really promote at New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. So our, we're supposed to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, so I'm going to be positive and I'm going to talk about the good. There is a lot of good in our system. I know you might find that hard to believe, but the very fact that we're here tonight talking about how we can make change doesn't happen in a lot of areas in this world and even in this country. The fact that a little tiny group, you guys will love us, we spent $372 on that bill, mostly in printing costs. So talk about getting money out of politics. Still got, you don't know what the heck. So in a tiny little group like the Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, like you guys, we're all volunteers. The fact that we can work hard and work together and make change, I think is something positive in this time of extreme negativity that we're dealing with the Trump administration. Also the fact that we have access to our political system and our elected officials. The fact that we can go to the Capitol building and track down our elected officials, whether they like it or not. But I will, Senator Wood says, come talk to me. I'd rather talk to the advocates than the lobbyists. So we do have some power when it comes to what we can get done on the legislative level. So in many this is unlike many places in our country and in our world. In addition, when decisions are being made that affect us, that affect our safety, that affect our well-being, our voice can be heard, and our voice is important, especially when we sit in committee hearings, and hopefully that we can move that forward. So that's the good news, okay? The bad news is that most of the real stuff happens behind closed doors and during the caucus, and we have no power over that. So the good news was we have this tiny bit of power, and the bad news is that's really not that much power, but what can we do with that little tiny bit of power? Because that little tiny bit of power is super strong. So how do we strategize with that? Without turning people away, but making it so that they will still listen to us. We really have to hone in on that little tiny bit of power we have. It's like that song my kids always listen to, Big Boat and the Big Wave. You're a little boat making big waves. We are all little tiny boats making very big waves against some huge military ships. But those waves really can make a difference, and I think we really have to remember that. So we have to strategize. Obviously, the lobbyists and the money in politics can seem like it's a lot bigger than us, but our voices and the fact that we're constituents really, really matters, and we can't forget that, no matter how mad they get at us. And they will get mad at you guys for trying to take money out of politics. They're going to get more mad at you guys than they are at us. So that's the one thing, is that so much does happen behind closed doors, and that can be really frustrating, especially when you think you have a yes. The other frustrating thing, what I'm going to talk mostly tonight about, is how you guys can move forward in getting a bill passed, are the committee hearing changes. So basically, you're ready to go and give your 3 minutes of testimony. Well, the committee changes, and it's 6 hours later, or it's the next day. And we call advocacy kind of an excruciating luxury, because you just sit there for 6 hours. But maybe you took the day off of work, right? So that you can be an advocate for immigration or animal rights. And it's the next day and you have to go to work. So that part of our system is really frustrating. So when I say, we can go to the Capitol and testify, it is a luxury, and a very difficult luxury. Our paid lobbyists are privy to that information, right? So while we're sitting there waiting for hours upon hours to see if our bill's going to be heard, or a bill we're fighting against, when we see we always called our NRA lobbyist Gun Barbie. When we saw Gun Barbie come in, we were like, oh, finally we're going to be heard. But the fact that the paid lobbyists are privy to that information, and us, little advocacy peons are not, can be frustrating. In addition to that, there's also the problem of a bill being changed at the last minute. And I'll explain what happened to us with the NRA later when I talk about our bill. But you will be, you have worked on a bill for 2 years, and suddenly 5 minutes before you're about to hear it in committee, you have the NRA flying in and getting even Democrat senators or representatives to try and make a change very quickly before we can research that change. And that's very frustrating. And it was especially frustrating, our bill, I should have told you, was keeping guns out of the hands of domestic violence offenders under protective orders. So we had even more of a responsibility to make sure that those changes, that we were okay with them, because they could have turned it into a bill that actually would have made women much more unsafe. So that was kind of scary for us, because it was a very difficult time. We're going, wait, stop, this can't happen. So that's something that people are looking at changing, but it might be something you want to look into, is how is that the the people's democracy when you can change a bill that quickly. In addition, as you know, money in politics, right? So we deal with the NRA, one of the worst lobbying groups in the country. I call them terrorists. They're not your average lobby group, to be honest. And we see, they've had a strong hold on our legislators for decades. In fact, the last thing I remember Phil Griego saying in front of me to the NRA Gun Barbie at me was, "Don't worry, honey, I won't let them stop any of your gun bills." So he's gonna look good in orange. But anyway, so we have to remember that we do have these big lobby organizations that we have to figure out how to deal with in terms of money in politics. Then I'm going to talk about the ugly. I'm going to talk about it very briefly. How women are treated in, now I call it the merry-go-round, as unconscionable. Women are treated with, and it really reveals a culture that is male-centric. They use bullying and intimidation tactics against us, and it really needs to stop. Nobody is talking about it, but we have seen our advocates and advocates for other groups being treated with such, I mean, you wouldn't believe it. We are yelled at, we are sworn at, we have doors slammed in our face. The closer you get to a bill getting passed, the worse it gets, the hotter it gets. And when we bring that up to legislators and say, hey, you know what, it's really not okay to be treating people like this, we get, yeah, well, if you were a professional lobbyist, it wouldn't bother you. And that's true. I'm a very thin-skinned person. I'm a wimp. I mean, if you are thin-skinned, you just have to pretend like you're thick-skinned in there. But I don't think that's okay, and I don't think anybody in this room thinks that's okay. When we teach our children not to be bullies, when we teach our children to treat people with kindness, we should expect the same for our elected officials. So I think that's something that we need to really start addressing, and not in an aggressive way, but in a gentle way, to call out that behavior and say, you know what, you don't yell and scream at people. The fact that we don't get domestic violence victims in front of committees because we've seen them be re-victimized. We are very wary about getting people who are gun violence victims speaking because we watch them treated with such rudeness. With people walking, texting, shuffling papers because they're against a gun violence prevention bill when you have somebody whose mother was shot and killed. So it's that kind of behavior that I do think as advocates we need to start really speaking out against, and as I said, in a kind way. Let's see, where else are we? We went through money and politics. So now I'm going to talk about, and I hope this is helpful to you, it doesn't have to be necessarily with just a bill, but can also be with something you choose to work on. So when I say how to get a bill passed, you can also translate that to not actually working directly on a bill, but on something else. We really have to think strategy. So for right now, for instance, for New Mexicans to prevent gun violence, we have a lot of members, some of them are big donors, and they say, what are you doing? Why are you going after these tiny bills? We want an assault weapons ban. We want universal background checks. We want this, this, this. We're like, yeah, we do too. But you have to know our culture. You have to know the climate, and you have to see what you can get done. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything done. So, and that's important not just with guns, but with immigration, with education. Sometimes we have to start small, and I know that's frustrating, but it might be, that's how we're going to move the needle on anything, is knowing what the climate is. Because we can make a lot of noise about something, and that's going to make us feel really good. But then, in the long run, we made a lot of noise, and we felt good for a little bit, and nothing got done, and we're just frustrated. So the stance we took, and we actually got this from, what do they call it? Illustrated One? I should remember. They're a great advocacy group. There are two criteria to ask when you are thinking about what you want to work on. The first one is, does it have an impact? Like that's a really important question. And the second is, what you're working on, is that something you can actually accomplish? So for instance, if you would take us, an assault weapons ban. Yes, we would love to see an assault weapons ban. Why in God's name are those war tools on our street? We leave that our group, up to the federal level, because for one, we couldn't pass an assault weapons ban in New Mexico. I can promise you, I hope I'm wrong, that it will not happen. It probably won't even happen in my lifetime. So we couldn't accomplish it, and then two, what kind of impact would that have on New Mexico in terms of gun violence prevention? Most likely small, unless there was a mass shooting, which obviously, sadly, that can happen anywhere. But most of our people being shot and killed aren't with assault weapons, but there was semi-automatic handguns. So that's how we really choose what our impact is going to be. Like we were saying, you only get one chance every 2 years. Right now it's the budget session, and I can assure you the governor's not going to call anything on guns. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You never know. Crazier things have happened. Trump's our president. So you really have to, choose very carefully what you're going to go after, because you really don't have that much time in 24 months. And you really have to, as well, look at the impact. So the reason why we chose getting guns out of hands of domestic violence offenders was because it kind of had a pretty broad impact. One, we knew that we're the 7th worst state for women being killed by partners, the majority with a firearm. Two, we were also looking at, and that will go up, that was 2015, we know 2016 will be worse because we track the shootings. We also saw that there was starting to be a tendency towards people shooting, this is depressing, sorry, shooting up their whole families and then shooting themselves. And so there was also a suicide component. We were also talking to victims who were constantly being threatened by their partners with a gun while they were on a protective order. And so we saw that this could actually have a pretty big impact in a lot of other places, suicide, not being threatened, and not being killed. And we also, then your second question is, can you accomplish it? We thought out of all the gun violence prevention bills we looked at when we looked at our laws, that this might be something with this governor that we could get passed, because she was an ex-prosecutor, and it's very hard to justify keeping guns in the hands of domestic violence offenders. We also knew that we had some Republican support. So before we decided it, we really went to those more moderate Republicans, and we knew we had them on board. We knew we didn't have some Democrats on board, but we knew we'd have enough. So it answered our two questions. It had impact, and it had a chance of being accomplished. And we did accomplish it in the fact that we got it, passed. So then the next question is, how do you actually get the bill passed, or whatever action you really want to work on? And it doesn't start the day of the session. We spent 2 years on that bill. You have to spend the 2 years on that bill. We were blessed. We did not figure this out on our own. We had the blessing of the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence and Josh Horowitz, who's the executive director. This is a Washington group that came in and helped us and gave us, their attorneys helped us draft the bill. So when I say $372, I should keep that in mind. Although they stayed at our place, we took them out to dinner on my dime. But anyway, they really, really helped us and taught us how to do this. So the first thing we did was we created a shareholders table. And that shareholders table consisted of, Ann, if I forget anybody, let me know. Our District Attorney Jennifer Padgett, DV groups, state police, Brian Egoff, members from Brian Egoff's office, the New Mexican Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Santa Fe Safe, other domestic violence groups, judges, the AG's office staff was always there. And we met on a regular basis, and they were long, horrible meetings. There were many times when that bill was dying, when the state police would say, no, we don't want those guns. We can't put them all in our evidence storage. We're going, no, we have to find a way. If we can't find a way to answer that problem, we actually went on tours of the of gun storage at the state police, which is fascinating on Cerritos Road. We have a lot of guns. And then they showed us the drugs. They were like, well, here, you want to see the drugs? The drugs were, bags of heroin and coke. We're going, oh my gosh. And then this is off the subject. And then they had a safe. It's like, what's in the safe, Grandma? And they said, no, it's, it was a bad joke. It's jewelry, money. But they had enough room to have more guns. So, but we knew that was an issue. And we knew if we just tried to have this bill move through without getting these shareholders at the table and getting their buy-in, that we weren't going to move the bill forward. So that's the first thing you have to do, is really think of who are those shareholders that you want at the table. The second thing we did was we worked with a lot of nonprofits, especially getting the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We actually called it a DV bill because it is. If we can step away from it being a gun bill, we might actually get it passed, and it really was about domestic violence. So really building those strong coalitions and advocates around your bill helps. It required an insane amount of patience. There were times Ann was at these meetings, we were just banging our heads against the wall because we couldn't understand why 27 other states do this, and we were just being told no, no, no. So we took the motto that no matter what, we are not going to take no for an answer at these meetings, and we made it through. And we got the bill drafted. And I think the bill had 21 drafts, literally. So then another thing we did was we had a lot of meetings with the governor's staff. looking back on it, I don't know if those were bogus meetings, if they were just trying to, and we actually had we were under the opinion that she would sign the bill. And we were told that to people that were close to her. So we were very surprised when she didn't. But you gotta meet with the governor's staff. They told us where they had issues on the bill, and we compromised. And that was another thing with the bill. We had to think, where are we gonna compromise, where are we not gonna compromise? The third thing is finding the right sponsor, and finding the sponsor to that bill early. That was one mistake we made. We didn't get on that fast enough. It didn't hurt us, but we should have done that faster. And really get a sponsor that's 100% behind your bill. Javier Martinez was our representative. He was great. He sat down with us for 2 hours. We went line by line why we chose the language in our bill. Make sure they respect your group. Make sure they respond to you. Make sure they know about you. Make sure you know that they will not make sweeping changes on that bill without at least first asking you. And at one point, the bill will go away and it'll be in their hands, and you can only cross your fingers. We almost left our bill. It got so watered down that we were this close to going, you know what, this isn't going to move forward anymore. In the long run, it would have been a very small move forward. But you have to be ready. You have to be ready to compromise, which sometimes can be really hard. And also figuring out where you can get agreement. Last thing we had to do, or anybody has to do in going after a bill, is getting your expert witnesses. And if you can get those expert witnesses at your shareholder tables, that's a real win. Now, we were blessed. We had Jennifer Padgett, our DA. She was a DA. Domestic violence was one of her biggest issues, and she was also a really sharp attorney. Get as many attorneys as you can at your shareholders meetings that know about your issue, because they can speak the lawyer speak where we sometimes can't, or I never can, to be honest. So she was a great expert witness. And then we also had law enforcement. So at one point, Nate Gentry was sweeping down like a raven going after roadkill on our bill. Oh boy, here he comes again. He was making a change that we knew wouldn't be safe for law enforcement. We had 2 officers there that, bless their hearts, but they really cared about PV, had been there for 3 hours. And we said, please go speak to our sponsor and let the senator know that these changes will be dangerous to law enforcement. If we had said that, it wouldn't have been the same. But having law enforcement come dressed in full uniform saying, this is dangerous for us, really made a difference, and that change didn't go through. So getting your expert witnesses, getting really good expert witnesses is crucial to getting any legislation passed. And then lastly, you've done all that work, and it is a lot of work, I'm not going to lie. You can't just work on legislation. You really have to get trust in communities. So we do a lot of stuff through different programs so that we can know, when the senators and the representatives, they go, oh, that's that group that works with kids. Oh, I like those guys. Oh, that's the group that does that, and they know us, and they know we're not an anti-gun group, no matter how we feel about guns. And they know we're not sitting there trying to take people's guns away, but just pass common gun violence prevention legislation. So really figuring out different ways you can get in the community, I think, is crucial. At one point in our bill, the NRA had swooped in, and they were trying to do a change that we were going to walk away from the bill. And it was a really awful moment. And Senator Richard Martinez from Rio Riva knew us because he knew about the student pledge against gun violence in Espanola. He knew about our gun buybacks that he did. He knew about our work at health fairs. So he trusted us. And he said, something's not right here. I want you guys to go back and talk about what's going on, and we're going to have this vote again on Monday. And I don't know if that necessarily would have happened if he didn't know who our group was and all the work we had done in his community. So that really, we can't just make this about Santa Fe. We have to really branch out and see how all the different communities we have to be able to work in. And lastly, a lot of it is educating our elected officials. So having a one-page book, talking points I should say, on a bill you're for or a bill you're against, and making sure you give that to the secretary with your logo on it, or his or her assistant, making sure if you can hand it to them directly. When you see them in the hall, say, hey, did you read that? But a lot of times, they have so many bills, they want to be educated. And if you're a group they trust, they'll start listening. We have blocked every single NRA bill since 2013. They have not gotten one through because we have this amazing group of volunteers. They comb through it. We have this one woman, Barbara Chatterjee, nothing gets past her. Every group needs a Barbara Chatterjee because she sits there and tracks and goes, look, that concealed carry bill went over here and they're trying to hide it here. So race over there and, say, this is what they're doing. That was the same thing they were trying to do over there. So it's really important that you watch very carefully the bills and how they're moving, and educate our elected officials to let them know. So a lot of times they just don't know. They have too many bills they're watching. So that's it. That's my good, the bad, the ugly, and I hope it was helpful. Not too boring. And then I guess if anybody has questions.